home revolution. I'm going to go ahead and read a few stats for y'all and present some questions and then get you guys' reactions. The first stat that I want to address is from McKinsey and Company. And their study found that 87% of workers embrace the opportunity to work remote if they're offered the opportunity. But another statistic that I found from Owl Labs states that 44% of companies still don't offer any form of remote work. So you've got 87% of workers who, would welcome that idea, but a lot of companies still haven't, capitalized on that opportunity yet. Close to half of companies don't offer any form of remote work at all. But what is the disconnect here? Let's talk a little bit about the critics of work from homes. One of the most famous critics of the work from home movement is Elon Musk. Elon famously said that work from home employees are pretending to work. But this is kind of like at odds with the facts because according to Bloomberg, an article from Bloomberg, productivity is up by 13% for work from home employees. And it's mainly because employees find themselves working more hours actually when they're working from home because they don't necessarily know when to turn it on and turn it off. So the question that I want you guys to sort of react to is I want to hear from a personal level, what has the work from home sort of era done for your life? Like, how has it helped your mental health? How has it helped your productivity? But let's start with that question. Just giving a few thoughts on myself, and then I'll hand it over to you all. It's definitely, afforded me the autonomy and freedom to really reclaim my time. I find myself being able to work on other things, whether they be throughout the workday or outside of the workday, but still be able to get my work done that is tasked for me at work. So at the end of the day, I feel a lot more productive. I don't feel like I lost my whole day to only work. I feel like I was able to work on personal tasks, whether that be family orientated personal tasks or side hustles and businesses like not doing it. But also being able to get my work done and being as effective as possible, even if I have to work a little bit later into the day. So ultimately, it is really reduced stress in my life. But love to hear from you all. What has the work from home era been like for you all? B, I'll start with you.
Work from home, as you mentioned, Nick, has completely changed my life. And coming from a company where I was working for the gentleman you just mentioned, Elon Musk, seeing in a lot of that environment, you didn't really have an opportunity to fully express yourself in a, I say in that work from home environment. You couldn't really maybe get the full point across just because of the production aspect and integration. Again, not saying that I agree with the sentiments by any means about productivity from his side and people working from home. But what I can say, people have different definitions of that. My productivity is not the same as yours. So from my experience, that work from home has allowed me to be able to expand and intertwine my personal and professional goals and objectives and really live life, at least in my opinion, the balanced best way possible. However, I understand at least the communication of productivity. Being in that type of environment and being in that setting, I know what the level, at least of expected productivity may be from someone at that level versus what the nominal job expectation of productivity may be. So that is a comparative, then it becomes relative. So not saying one way is right or wrong, but it becomes relative. My experience has been tremendous in the transition as to where I'm working from home now permanently and not having to worry about any of the nuances as to if I will or if I won't.
Love that. Jay, you want to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the work from home standpoint has been very, um, very transforming for me as well. Um, I think being able to work at your own pace, and from the personal development side of being able to figure out other interests, spend more time, with your family, things of that nature, your loved ones. I think it's, all pluses in that area instead of, having to commute, extra 30, 45 minutes to work each day. I think those are all positives. Where I think that a hybrid solution, I think, is more likely favorable, in my opinion, where you're at the office maybe 2 times out of the week. Just from my point of view, for a job, I think is definitely more favorable, in my opinion, just so that I think it helps improve communication so much better with your colleagues and your coworkers. Just to be able to have, better communication with them. From my experience and some of my friends' experience, I think, you can have a manager sometimes that doesn't know how to manage you. And virtually, I think it's very hard, if a manager, is not taking that extra time and spending it and developing, the employee. Whereas I think, having a couple hybrid days in the office can help build that relationship, in person, along with other coworkers and things of that nature. So I think, having that hybrid. And then also, I think another negative is just, when sometimes when you're developing yourself on the personal side while working, I think, sometimes you can kind of get a little bit more agitated when someone from work kind of brings you back into that realm, whether it's through a ping or, something through Microsoft Teams or Slack or something like that. And you're just like, like, like I was breaking away, but now I got to kind of get back into this world. So I think, from those two sides, I think there's both pros and cons, but I think a hybrid is where you can kind of meet in the middle.
Yeah, fair points. I think we'll talk about this on another podcast, but I think one of the biggest appeals of work from home is being able to work from anywhere. So if you get into a context where you're in a hybrid environment and you have to come in 2 days out of the week, maybe you can't live in Kansas and work a job in LA. Maybe you can't, live in a place where you can actually afford a home, and still commute into work 2 days a week. So I think there's a lot of interesting questions, even with the hybrid model, because, although it gives you some flexibility and autonomy, we still have the financial piece. And we'll talk a lot about that on another segment. But a couple other questions that I want to jump to here is, we talked a lot about productivity. I want you guys to tell me, your thoughts on what productivity actually is. For me, I don't think you can be productive in your job if you're in a bad mental health space. So if you're, experiencing high, intensity stress, or you're feeling an existential crisis because you don't know who you are, all of that stuff is going to bleed into your workplace. And if you're burnt out or if you're overworked, and you're stressed out because of it, I don't really think there's a possibility in the long term to really have productive workers. You're really just going to get into a game where folks are working as hard as they can for you for a short amount of time, but then that productivity is going to taper off. Then they're going to start to get frustrated with the job, and then you're going to have turnover. So I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on that. Just a quick definition for you all. Just give me a quick, your quick thoughts on what you guys' definition of productivity is.
Productivity exists when you are assessing parameters of your performance and you're looking at your total performance and you're trying to see where those parameters exist and are they being productive or regressive. And in assessing those parameters, there can be multitude of factors that exist for not only for the working level person, but even for the professional person as they're trying to assess how they are moving through a overall progression. And it's not the instance of productivity that is the issue. It comes from the issue when we don't know how to explain how we are productive in the environments that we exist in. And that is a point of expression. So I do believe that mental health plays a part, but I'm also, at least the model that I've seen, where you can burn someone out and get even maybe more optimal productivity out of them than the person that is paying someone at equal pay, but not pulling as much out of them, though they may be happier and may support the company longer. But does that really impact the bottom line more prominently? And as an owner and as a person who's looking at it from a CEO or high level exec perspective, again, not that I am, but looking at it from that perspective, they're more concerned with the bottom line.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair point. B. What I would say to that for folks is that, your bottom line is always going to be affected if you having constant turnover. I mean, any executive will tell you that, bleeding from an HR side or bleeding from a recruiting side of your business, especially if you're a big business, is going to be a huge expense. So if you're having, regular turnover from employees, but, you're getting a short burst of productivity, you're having to rehire folks, you're going to have to train them, you're going to have to go through the recruiting process. So to me, I haven't really crunched the numbers, and we can go over some studies as well, but it seems like it would be a better value add for the organization long term, if you try to satisfy the needs of your employees in some sort of capacity. At the very least, surveying your employees and trying to figure out what the stress triggers are for them. What are the things that are going to motivate them, and what are the things that are actually going to be to their detriment? Employees want to have some level of control, and when they feel like they're out of control, that's when you get into the real stress element. But Jay, jump in real quick and talk about productivity from your standpoint.
Yes, I mean absolutely. I think that's you hit on the point perfectly. I think at the end there, Nick. I think leadership is the most important aspect, obviously, to productivity and how they measure that. And I think the only way that true productivity can come out of any workforce is if they're listening to their workforce. If they're giving their employees a voice, to share their perspectives, to share their ideas, without worries of, fear or retaliation, for saying something. And they have that openness to, sort of, throw ideas out there, get recognition, figure out ways to solve problems and engage into the job. But I think, it's harder when, leadership is just kind of, throwing out orders like, here's what you have to do. Here's, how we get to this metric. Here's what we need to do to get to this metric, and do this, and no variation of that. You just have to kind of listen to that, and it's just kind of top down structure. And I think we've seen that model existing for decades, and I think I think it doesn't it produces high turnover, like you said, and just bad mental health issues for employees, and low morale, and not feeling passionate about their job and their day to day. So I think productivity starts obviously with the leadership, but they have to empower their employees, empower their workforce first and foremost.
Yeah, 100%, Jay. I get where you're coming from there, and thank you for sharing that. One interesting question that I want you guys to touch on real quick as well is that, we talked a lot about like trying to understand the employee from a personal standpoint, as a leader. But the question that I want to pose for you all is work from home a matter of preference, when we're comparing introverts to extroverts? Introverts, pretty much make up 50% of the nation, and extroverts make up pretty much 50% of the nation. But do you guys think that there is some sort of connection to wanting to work from home if you're an introvert versus an extrovert? For me, being an introverted person, I don't get a lot of my energy from being around people all day. So if I'm in the office all day, a lot of the times my energy is being drained double time. It's being drained with my work and my clients, but it's also being drained by the amount of communication that I have to make on a daily basis. So being an introverted person, it's easier for me to actually be productive when I'm able to, work by myself, but then work in a team when I need to get stuff done, but do the priority of, do the majority of my work, on my own. But what are you guys' thoughts, just real quick on that? Being an introverted worker versus an extroverted worker.
Yeah, I just think it depends on the scenario, right? Because as what you're kind of alluding to is more so office scenario when you may have to engage with someone, but someone going in as, a tech or factory worker. I mean, there are certain instances where you may have to engage, but when you have a task that doesn't require you to, or you may be an independent contractor, you may be a plumber, whatever the case may be, you might not have to actually engage with people. So I don't believe the introversion factor is a full implication of work from home, because me personally, I'm an extrovert, and the work from home really works for me. But I have seen people who are introverts that I definitely worked with, because you can tell in the environment that we were in that it kind of plagued them. But even as the pandemic picked up, they were like, we're still going to go to the office because we can be more productive here. I can focus on my work. I don't have the distractions of home. So I feel like it depends on the job, depends on the person. There's a few more parameters that are associated with it.
That makes sense. Jay, you want to jump in real quick on that?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I think it's important to have that that option, and it definitely depends on the industry, right? Like if it's a marketing firm and you have to kind of collaborate and on ideas with other people, or you're assembly line worker and you're kind of just doing manual labor. It definitely depends. Or if you're in sales and you can be completely removed from everybody else on your team, and you can just get your job done on your own. um, I think it definitely varies, but I think now is the most important time where people are actually considering this, and considering what they value and what they need as an employee and as a worker. And I think that's a good thing.
I love that. I love that. So, in closing, y'all, like, where do we go from here? What sort of future would you like to see? Just sharing a quick success story here. I was just reading an article from Spotify CEO yesterday on LinkedIn, and Spotify introduced a work from anywhere policy in 2021. And since they've seen increased staff retention, and increased diverse representation, and this is even during the Great Recession. I mean, the Great Resignation. So what sort of future do you guys see? Do you guys see a world where there's a more hybrid environment? Do you see a world where it makes more sense for employees to have more control over their time if they have the flexibility to work anywhere? Or do you see a world where, everybody, for the most part, or at least the majority, are forced to go back into the office?
Jay, you want to take that?
Yeah, I think it I think it'll never, well, at least for the next five or so years, I think get to a full time working at the office type of situation. I think especially with how deep people have gone, I think over these last couple years, I think hybrid will be the most that jobs kind of imply, because I mean, even right now, like you guys said, there's so many different corporations that are still allowing you to fully work from home or work from a different state, and which is really good. So I think the hybrid is kind of the max solution right now. People are even hesitant about that. I think for the next couple years. So I think hybrid is a good max for that. I don't think it should ever be, full 5 days a week, 4 or 5 days a week, every day, every week, situation anymore. I think we've all kind of figured out that is a little bit too toxic.
Yes, I am in concurrence with that. I definitely believe a hybrid balance is required unless you're going to compensate, appropriately for not only the constraint of having to drive in and out of the office, but just the lapse of time that again is going to by any mechanism decrease productivity because you're having to commute, and people that have to commute, as I know from experience, as well as from talking to multiple others that do commute, they are not going to be willing to make up that time at home or come in earlier to do so. You're going to have to factor that in to their working environment. And so if you can get more productivity, sometimes it may be a little better to have a hybrid environment. But I'm still full force saying work remote, choose what you're able to control in your day, because there are other parameters that will not be able to be controlled. This is one that should be able to be.
While we don't have all the answers, we know that something must be done and something must change. It starts with building leverage. Make the pledge to honor your mental health over everything and don't compromise. If your mental health is not being respected, employees can vote with their feet. If your job is not treating you fairly, leave. If you want to make a change, you can organize with other groups of like-minded colleagues at your organization and get buy-in from employees at all levels. Draw up a plan and take your grievances to decision makers at your organization. We want to start with demanding that all companies clearly state on an annual basis how they are working to reduce stress in the workplace and build in accountability. Finally, sign our petition. We are demanding that OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, implement standard guidelines for reducing stress in the workplace. We are proposing that OSHA mandates that large employers implement things like 4-day work weeks, optional work from home, and mandate that all employers offer employees at least 2 months of vacation each year, among many other things to reduce stress in the workplace. But we also want to hear from you. Contribute your ideas by signing up for our Reddit forum, share your stories and ideas on how companies can reduce stress in the workplace. We'll include your stories in our petition. Our petition and forum community, as well as more information on our movement, can be accessed at notdoingit.org. We hope you can join us.